For 7 years, Laura Bennett stopped existing. She changed her name more times than she could count. She worked quiet jobs in quiet towns, always moving before anyone got too close, always careful never to use a bank account or a phone that could be traced back to her old life. She trained herself to forget her old habits and adopt new ones. She learned new languages just so nobody would question her accent. She missed her mother's 60th birthday. She missed her sister's wedding. She missed every single holiday, every phone call, every simple moment that most people take for granted. She became a ghost on purpose, because she believed that staying hidden was the only way to protect the people she loved and the secrets she still carried. Slowly, very slowly, she started to build a small, quiet life under a new name. She still loved flying more than anything else in the world, so once in a while, when it felt safe enough, she would buy a plane ticket like any regular traveler and sit by the window just to feel like herself again for a few hours. That is exactly why she was sitting in seat 14C on Sky Pacific Flight 212 that morning. She was not there on a mission. She was not there to save anyone. She was simply a tired woman going home to visit the country she had not set foot in for 7 long years, using a passport with a name that was not her own. 3 hours into the flight, everything changed. Captain Michael Rhodes, a pilot with almost 20 years of experience, suddenly grabbed his chest in the cockpit. His face turned pale. His hands slipped from the controls. Within seconds, he collapsed onto the floor, unconscious. The co-pilot, a young officer named Sophie Turner, had only been flying commercial planes for 2 years. She had never handled an emergency like this alone. Her voice shook as she called for a doctor over the intercom and radioed air traffic control for help. In the cabin, passengers began to notice something was wrong. The plane wobbled slightly. Flight attendants moved quickly but tried to stay calm, telling everyone it was a small technical issue. But fear spreads fast on an airplane. People started whispering. Some passengers gripped their armrests tightly. A child began to cry, sensing his mother's fear even though she said nothing. That was the moment Laura Bennett stood up. She did not think about her hidden identity. She did not think about the secrets she had protected for 7 years. She only thought about the plane, the people, and the fact that the co-pilot inside that cockpit needed help right now. She walked past the flight attendants with quiet confidence, and something about the way she moved made them step aside without even asking who she was. She entered the cockpit and found Sophie shaking, trying to keep the plane steady while a passenger who claimed to be a nurse checked on Captain Rhodes. "I need you to listen to me," Laura said calmly. "I am a trained pilot. I can help you fly this plane." Sophie stared at her, confused and scared. "I don't even know who you are." "You don't have time to find out," Laura replied. "Right now, you need a second set of hands you can trust, and I am the only one on this plane who can give you that." Something about her voice made Sophie trust her instantly. It was not just confidence. It was experience, the kind that cannot be faked. Laura slipped into the empty seat, checked the instruments, and immediately understood the situation. The plane was flying steady for now, but they were hours away from any large airport, fuel was becoming a concern, and a storm system was building along their path. She began speaking to air traffic control herself, giving clear and exact details about their position, altitude, and fuel levels, using words that only someone with real training would know. "Ma'am, can you confirm your pilot qualifications?" the ground controller asked over the radio. Laura paused for a second before answering. "Captain Laura Bennett, former Air Force pilot." There was a long silence on the radio. Then the controller's voice came back, sounding uncertain. "Captain Bennett was reported dead 7 years ago. Please confirm your identity again." Laura closed her eyes for a moment. "I know how this sounds. Right now, it does not matter. Just help me get this plane down safely, and I will explain everything after." For the next 2 hours, Laura worked beside Sophie like they had trained together for years. She calculated the safest route around the storm. She helped monitor the fuel levels carefully. She spoke to the passengers over the intercom in a calm, steady voice, telling them that the flight crew was working together to bring everyone home safely. Something about her voice made the whole cabin relax, even though nobody knew who she really was. Halfway through the flight, the storm grew stronger than the weather reports had predicted. Thick clouds surrounded the plane, and sudden gusts of wind pushed the aircraft sideways. Warning lights blinked across the control panel. Sophie's hands tightened on the controls, her breathing fast and shallow. "We can't hold this course," she said, panic creeping into her voice. Laura placed a steady hand on the throttle beside her. "Yes, we can. Watch the horizon, not the panel. Small movements, not big ones. I've flown through worse than this." Her voice never rose, even as the plane shook around them. She guided Sophie through each gust, calling out small corrections one at a time, until slowly, the aircraft settled into a smoother path. In the cabin, the turbulence had frightened many passengers. A young boy near the back began crying loudly, and his mother tried her best to comfort him while her own hands trembled. An elderly man closed his eyes and gripped his wife's hand tightly, whispering a quiet prayer. A flight attendant named Carla walked the aisle slowly, repeating calm words to anyone who looked too afraid, even though her own heart was racing. When Laura's voice came over the intercom again, steady and unshaken, something in the cabin changed. People stopped gripping their armrests so tightly. The crying boy quieted down, resting his head on his mother's shoulder. It was strange, passengers would say later, how one voice they had never heard before could make an entire plane full of strangers feel safe. Back in the cockpit, Laura kept working through every detail with sharp focus. She rechecked the fuel numbers twice, recalculated their descent path around the last edge of the storm, and stayed in constant contact with ground control, giving them information they needed to prepare the runway. Sophie glanced at her more than once, amazed at how someone could stay so calm while carrying the weight of nearly 300 lives. "How are you not scared?" Sophie finally asked. Laura did not look away from the instruments. "I am scared," she said quietly. "I just learned a long time ago that fear can sit beside you, but it cannot be the one flying the plane." Down on the ground, however, things were far from calm. The moment air traffic control heard the name Laura Bennett, they contacted the Air Force. Officers who had worked with her 7 years ago were pulled into emergency meetings. Old files were reopened. Nathan, her old friend who still kept her photo on his desk, was called into the room and shown the radio transcript. He read her name 3 times before he could speak. "That's her voice pattern. That's exactly how she used to talk during emergencies. It's her. She's alive." As Flight 212 came closer to the airport, ground crews prepared for an emergency landing. Ambulances lined up on the runway for Captain Rhodes. Fire trucks stood ready in case anything went wrong. Laura took the final approach herself, guiding the huge aircraft down through cloudy skies with steady hands, just like she used to do years ago before her life disappeared. The wheels touched the runway smoothly. The passengers, many of them crying with relief, broke into applause, not knowing that the woman who helped save them had once been declared dead by the very government that was now rushing to meet her. The moment the plane came to a stop, military officers were waiting. Laura stepped off the aircraft into a crowd of stunned faces. Reporters had already heard rumors and were gathering outside the airport gates. Nathan pushed through the crowd of officials and stopped right in front of her, unable to say a single word for almost a full minute. "We had a funeral for you," he finally said, his voice breaking. "We stood there and said goodbye to an empty coffin." Laura looked at him, her eyes tired but honest. "I know. I am sorry. I thought disappearing was the only way to keep everyone safe." Over the next several days, Laura sat through long meetings with military officials, investigators, and doctors. She explained everything: the crash, the years of hiding, the constant fear of being found, and the quiet, lonely life she had built just to protect the people she loved from danger she could not fully explain. Some officials were angry that she had stayed hidden for so long. Others understood completely, knowing the real dangers that came with the mission she had once carried out. The hardest meeting of all was with her family. Her mother walked into the room slowly, almost afraid to believe her own eyes. When she finally reached Laura, she held her so tightly that neither of them could speak for a long time. Her sister Grace stood in the doorway crying, whispering, "You're really here. You're really here." For the first time in 7 years, Laura let herself cry too, not because she was scared, but because she was finally, truly home. Her mother kept touching her face, her hair, her hands, as if checking that she was really made of flesh and not just a dream she had imagined too many times. "I used to hear your voice sometimes," her mother admitted softly. "In the kitchen, in the garden. I thought I was losing my mind." Laura held her mother's hands tightly. "You weren't losing your mind. I think some part of me was always trying to find my way back to you." Grace pulled out her old phone and showed Laura hundreds of photos taken over the years, birthdays, holidays, small everyday moments that Laura had missed. Laura looked through each one slowly, memorizing the years she had lost, promising herself she would never let that much time slip away again. Even her father, a quiet man who rarely showed emotion, wrapped his arms around her and simply said, "Welcome home," his voice cracking on the last word. In the weeks that followed, the story of Flight 212 spread across the world. News channels called her the pilot who came back from the dead. Passengers from the flight spoke about the calm voice that had guided them safely through the storm, never knowing they were listening to someone the world had already mourned. Captain Rhodes made a full recovery in the hospital and personally thanked Laura for saving not just the flight, but his life as well. Laura was given a choice about her future, just like before. She could quietly return to a normal life, free from the shadows she had lived in for so long. Or she could go back to active service, this time without having to hide who she truly was. After everything she had lost, and everything she had finally gotten back, she chose something in between. She stayed close to her family, rebuilt the relationships that 7 years had almost destroyed, and slowly returned to the skies, not as a secret, and not as a ghost, but simply as herself. Today, Laura Bennett still flies. Her mother no longer needs to visit an empty grave, because her daughter calls her every single week without fail. Her sister Grace teaches children how to fly kites again, standing right beside her once more. And every time Laura steps into a cockpit, she remembers that day on Flight 212, the day she stopped hiding, the day the world learned that sometimes the people we think we have lost are simply waiting for the right moment to come back and save us. She was considered dead for 7 years. But on the day it mattered most, she proved that she had never really left at all.